My name is Abigail Sterling, and I'm 34 years old. On the night my mother presented me with a framed photograph of my own childhood bedroom and told me she'd already promised it to my cousin's unborn baby, I understood that I had never been a daughter to her. I had been inventory. The photograph sat on the dining room table between the roast chicken and the asparagus. My mother, Camille Sterling, 72 years old, silver hair immaculate, pearls catching the candlelight, had placed it there like a centerpiece. I recognized the room immediately. Yellow walls I'd painted myself at 15. The window seat where I'd read 100 novels. The small desk where I'd written my first short stories and dreamed of becoming someone who mattered. "Your cousin Brian and his wife are expecting," Camille announced to the table. My brother Drew, his wife Melissa, my uncle Gerald. All of them nodding like this was normal. They need more space. The house in Lexington is perfect. 2 bedrooms, finished basement, that lovely garden. I told them they could have it. The Lexington house. My house. The one my grandmother had signed over to me 6 months before she died. "The house belongs to me," I said quietly. Camille's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "Abigail, you live in Chicago. What do you need with a house in Massachusetts?" "It's not about need, Mother. It's about ownership. Grandma left it to me. For sentimental reasons." Camille waved her hand. You know how she was in those final months. Confused. Emotional. She probably thought she was doing something meaningful. She was doing something meaningful. She was giving me a home you couldn't take away. The table went silent. Drew stared at his plate. Melissa studied the ceiling. Uncle Gerald coughed into his napkin. And Camille Sterling, pillar of the Weston community, chair of the library board, hostess of the most anticipated Christmas party in Middlesex County, set down her fork with the deliberate precision of someone preparing for battle. "I've already given Brian the keys," she said. "They're moving in next month. Before I tell you what happened next, I need to ask you something. Have you ever looked at your family across a dinner table and realized they don't see you as a person? They see you as a collection of resources they haven't figured out how to access yet? And if you've ever been treated like your boundaries were inconveniences and your possessions were community property, hit like and subscribe. Because this is the story of how one photograph, one key, and one grandmother's secret changed everything. Let me take you back to the beginning. My name is Abigail Sterling. I'm 34 years old. I'm a senior editor at a publishing house in Chicago, a job I fought for, earned, and love. I've spent my adult life building a career my family has never understood because it doesn't come with a spouse or a suburban address or the right kind of status. In my mother's world, a woman without a husband and children is incomplete, a sentence missing its punctuation. I've been incomplete for 34 years. My family lives in Weston, Massachusetts, one of those towns where the lawns look like they've been trimmed with nail scissors and the public schools send 30% of their graduates to Ivy League colleges. My father, Edward Sterling, was an investment banker who died of a heart attack when I was 19. He was a quiet man who loved model trains and John le Carré novels and who, in retrospect, had probably spent his entire marriage trying to become invisible enough to survive it. After his death, my mother took over the family the way a corporation takes over a competitor, efficiently, completely, and with no room for dissent. My brother Drew is 36. He works in commercial real estate, lives in a colonial in Sudbury with Melissa and their 2 daughters, and has spent his entire life doing exactly what our mother tells him to do. He's not cruel. He's just absent. He learned early that the safest place in Camille Sterling's orbit was the periphery, and he's stayed there ever since. Then there's my grandmother, Lillian Foster, my mother's mother. She was 91 when she died, and she was the only person in my family who ever looked at me like I was enough. Not too much. Not too difficult. Not too independent. Just enough. Lillian had been a high school English teacher for 40 years. She'd introduced me to Jane Austen and Virginia Woolf and Toni Morrison. She'd read every story I ever wrote, from the clumsy fairy tales of my childhood to the first real short story I published in a literary journal at 25. She'd framed that story and hung it on her living room wall, right next to a photograph of the two of us at my college graduation. "Your mother doesn't understand artists," Lillian said to me once, when I was home from college and hiding in her kitchen from another family dinner that had turned into an interrogation about my life choices. She never has. She looks at a painting and sees a price tag. She looks at a book and sees a doorstop. It's not her fault, exactly. She was born practical in a way that borders on pathology. Then why do I keep trying to make her proud? Lillian had set down her teacup and looked at me with those sharp gray eyes. "Because you're human, darling. We all want our mothers to see us. The trick is learning to want other things more." The Lexington house sat on a quiet street near the town center, a two-story colonial with a wraparound porch and a garden that Lillian had tended for 50 years. She'd bought it with her husband in 1958, raised my mother there, and then stayed after he died in 1985. Every room held a memory. The kitchen where she'd taught me to make apple pie. The living room where she'd read aloud to me on rainy afternoons. The bedroom with the yellow walls that she'd painted with me the summer I was 15 and desperate for a space that felt like my own. When Lillian died in November of last year, I flew home for the funeral. I stood in the receiving line at the church and accepted condolences from people who'd known her for decades, former students, neighbors, fellow teachers, the woman who'd done her taxes. My mother presided over the event like a queen receiving tribute, wearing a black dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent and accepting sympathy with the practiced grace of someone who understood grief as performance. The will was read 2 weeks later in a lawyer's office in Boston. I flew back for that too. The lawyer was a woman named Ellen Cho, who had been Lillian's attorney for 15 years. She had a calm, deliberate manner and the kind of face that gave nothing away. My mother sat at the head of the conference table. Drew sat beside her. I took the chair at the far end, near the window. "The estate is relatively straightforward," Ellen began. Lillian had various accounts and investments, which will be divided equally between her two children, Camille and Gerald, after certain specific bequests are satisfied. My mother nodded approvingly. This was how things were supposed to work. Assets flowing downward. Elders providing for their children. The natural order. To Drew Sterling, Ellen continued, Lillian leaves her collection of first edition novels, appraised at approximately $40,000, and the sum of $50,000 for his daughter's education. Drew looked surprised. He'd probably expected something small, a token. Lillian had loved him, but they'd never been close the way she and I were. To Abigail Sterling, Ellen said, and my mother shifted in her chair, Lillian leaves the sum of $75,000 and the property at 47 Hawthorne Street, Lexington, Massachusetts, including the house and all its contents. The silence that followed was absolute. My mother's face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Confusion, disbelief, and then, slowly, unmistakably, fury. The house? Camille's voice was sharp. She left Abigail the house? That's correct. But I'm her daughter. The house should come to me. It's been in the family for 60 years. Lillian was very clear about her wishes. Ellen's voice didn't waver. She updated her will 18 months ago with full legal counsel. She was of sound mind and made these decisions deliberately. My mother turned to me. Her expression was controlled, but her eyes were blazing. Did you know about this? No, I said truthfully. She never told me. I don't believe you. That's your prerogative. Camille stood up. Her chair scraped against the hardwood floor. This isn't over. My mother was 91 years old. She was confused. She was easily influenced. I'll be contesting this. You're certainly welcome to consult your own attorney, Ellen said calmly. But I should advise you that Lillian anticipated potential challenges and took steps to ensure her wishes would be respected. She had her cognitive function evaluated by a geriatric specialist 3 weeks before updating the will. The evaluation confirmed she was fully competent. My mother's face went pale. She did what? Additionally, she provided a written statement explaining her decisions in detail. I have a copy for you if you'd like to read it. Camille didn't take the paper Ellen offered. She grabbed her purse from the back of her chair, shot me a look that could have curdled milk, and walked out. Drew followed her, pausing only to squeeze my shoulder and mutter, "Congratulations, I guess." I sat in the conference room for a long time after they left. Ellen waited with me. "Your grandmother was a remarkable woman," she said finally. "She loved you very much." "I know," I said. "I just wish she'd warned me what she was planning." "She told me you'd say that." Ellen smiled. "She also told me to tell you that the yellow bedroom is yours and that you should paint it whatever color you want." I laughed, then I cried, then I signed the papers that made me the owner of the house where I'd spent the happiest moments of my childhood. The trouble started almost immediately. My mother didn't contest the will. Ellen had made that essentially impossible, but she found other ways to punish me. She stopped calling. She stopped including me in family events. When my cousin announced her engagement at Easter dinner, I found out about it through an Instagram post. When Drew's daughter had her first piano recital, no one told me until it was over. I had become, in my mother's careful phrasing, difficult to reach. The house in Lexington sat empty for the first 6 months. I couldn't bring myself to rent it out, and I wasn't ready to sell. It was still too full of Lillian, her books, her furniture, her garden. The roses she'd planted 40 years ago were still blooming. The kitchen still smelled faintly of the lavender soap she'd used to wash her hands. I flew back once a month to check on things. I hired a neighbor to mow the lawn and a service to handle the basic maintenance. I told myself I'd figure out a long-term plan eventually. Then, in late May, I received a call from the neighbor I'd hired to watch the property. Her name was Mrs. Patterson, and she'd lived next door to Lillian for 30 years. "Abigail," she said, her voice carrying that particular tightness people get when they're delivering bad news. "I thought you should know. There's been someone at the house." "What do you mean? A break-in?" No, nothing like that. It's your mother. She's been coming by. She has a key. She's been showing people around." "Showing people around?" "Yesterday, she came with a young couple. They were in the house for over an hour. When they came out, the woman was taking measurements of the front garden." I called my mother immediately. She answered on the 3rd ring, her voice cool and composed. "Abigail, how nice to hear from you." "Mom, what are you doing at the Lexington house?" "Checking on things. Making sure the property is maintained." "Mrs. Patterson said you were showing it to people." A pause. "I'm not sure what you're talking about." "She said you were there with a couple. Taking measurements." "That's absurd." I was simply walking through the garden with some friends from the library board who were curious about the property. "Mom, the house is mine. You can't just." "The house is in our family, Abigail. It's been in our family for 60 years. I'm simply looking after it." "Without telling me? Must I tell you everything? You're the one who moved to Chicago. You're the one who left. You can't expect to manage a property from 1,000 miles away." I hung up feeling unsettled. I didn't trust her. I'd never trusted her, not really, but this was something more. This was active, deliberate. She was doing something, and I didn't know what. I flew home the following week to change the locks. The day I arrived, I found the house exactly as I'd left it, and yet somehow different. The living room furniture had been rearranged. A few of Lillian's personal items, a ceramic vase she'd loved, a set of silver candlesticks, were missing. And in the kitchen, on the counter where Lillian had always kept her recipe box, there was a folder. A folder full of real estate listings. I opened it with shaking hands. The listings were all for properties in the Lexington area. Some were circled. Some had notes in my mother's handwriting. At the bottom of the stack was a printed email. "Brian, I've spoken with the lawyer. The title situation is complicated, but I'm confident we can resolve it. Abigail can be difficult, but she's always been susceptible to family pressure. I've told everyone the house is yours, and I intend to make good on that promise. Start packing. Love, and Camille. I stared at the email for a long time. Brian. My cousin Brian, Gerald's son. He'd gotten married 2 years ago. His wife was pregnant, I remembered. They were living in a small apartment in Waltham. My mother had promised them my house. I didn't confront her immediately. I'd learned, over 34 years of being Camille Sterling's daughter, that direct confrontation was a losing strategy. She was too good at deflection, too skilled at turning every accusation back on the accuser. If I wanted to stop her, I needed more than anger. I needed evidence. I called Ellen Cho from the kitchen of my grandmother's house. Ellen, it's Abigail Sterling. I need your help. I told her everything. The visit, the rearranged furniture, the missing items, the real estate listings, the email. She listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Abigail, have you considered that this might be more than just family pressure? What do you mean? I mean, your mother showing the house to potential buyers or tenants or whoever that couple was is legally significant. If she's representing herself as the owner or as someone with the authority to transfer the property, that could constitute fraud. Fraud. She's trying to give away something that doesn't belong to her. That's conversion at minimum. It could also be considered elder abuse, depending on what she might have tried before your grandmother died. What do you mean, what she might have tried? Ellen paused. Lillian asked me not to discuss this with you unless it became necessary. I think it's become necessary. Tell me. 2 years ago, your mother came to me with a document. A durable power of attorney that would have given her full control over Lillian's finances and property. She said Lillian had agreed to it. She wanted me to file it immediately. And? I called Lillian. She had no idea what I was talking about. Your mother had drafted the document herself, without Lillian's knowledge or consent. She'd forged your grandmother's signature. I felt the world tilt slightly. She forged. Lillian chose not to pursue it legally. She didn't want to destroy the family. But she took steps. She updated her will. She moved her most valuable assets into trusts. She made sure your mother couldn't access anything. Ellen paused. And she made sure the house went to you. Not just because she loved you, but because she knew it would be the one thing your mother couldn't touch. Except she is touching it. She's already given it away. Then we need to stop her. Do you have any siblings, cousins, anyone in the family who might know more? I thought for a moment. Drew? No. My brother was a nonentity, a ghost in his own life. He wouldn't know anything. Gerald? My uncle was my mother's brother, but he'd always been intimidated by her. He wouldn't cross her. Brian, I said. My cousin Brian. He's the one she promised the house to. Maybe if I talk to him directly. Be careful, Ellen warned. If your mother finds out you're investigating, she'll accelerate whatever she's planning. She's already proven she's willing to forge documents. Don't give her a reason to get desperate. I hung up the phone and sat in my grandmother's kitchen, surrounded by the ghosts of her lavender soap and her apple pies, and I understood that I was at war. Not the loud, obvious kind. The quiet kind. The kind where weapons were paper and ink and lies told at dinner parties. My mother had spent her entire life learning how to win this kind of war. I had spent my life avoiding it. But this was my house. My grandmother's gift. My future. I wasn't going to let it go without a fight. I found Brian at his office in Waltham. He worked for a commercial insurance company, processing claims in a cubicle farm that smelled like burnt coffee and industrial carpet cleaner. He looked surprised to see me, surprised and wary. Abigail. Hey, what are you doing here? I need to talk to you about the Lexington house. His face shifted. The wariness became something sharper. What about it? My mother told you she was giving it to you, didn't she? Brian looked around the office. Nobody was paying attention. He lowered his voice anyway. She said it was a family property. She said she had the right to. The house belongs to me. Grandma Lillian left it to me in her will. My mother has no legal right to it. But Aunt Camille said, I don't care what she said. I'm telling you the truth. The house is mine. The title is in my name. If you move into that property, you'll be trespassing. Brian's expression hardened. So what? You're going to kick out a pregnant woman and her husband? Is that what you're telling me? I'm telling you that my mother lied to you. She's been lying to everyone. She tried to forge Grandma's signature on a power of attorney 2 years ago. She's been trying to get control of that property since before Lillian died. You're not the first person she's made promises to. You're just the most convenient. I don't believe you. Then call Ellen Cho. She was Grandma's lawyer. She'll confirm everything I've just told you. Call the Registry of Deeds. The property records are public. Brian stared at me. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Camille said you were difficult, he said finally. She said you'd try to keep the house for yourself even though you live in Chicago and never visit. She said you'd put your own selfishness over family. Family. I almost laughed. You want to talk about family? My grandmother left me that house because she knew my mother would steal it if she could. She left it to me because I'm the only one who ever visited her without wanting something. I'm the one who sat with her through her final illness while my mother was at dinner parties pretending everything was fine. And now you're telling me I'm selfish? Brian looked away. I didn't know all of that. Of course you didn't. My mother controls the narrative. She always has. What am I supposed to tell Karen? We've been planning. We've told people. She's already bought furniture. Tell her the truth. Tell her you were lied to. She's going to be devastated. I'm sorry. I really am. But this isn't my fault. It's my mother's. I left Brian standing in his cubicle and drove back to Lexington. The house was quiet when I unlocked the front door. The evening light fell through the windows in long golden rectangles. I walked through the room slowly, touching the furniture, the books, the photographs on the mantel. This was mine. My grandmother had wanted me to have it. And my mother had tried to steal it. I sat down at the kitchen table. I pulled out my phone. I called my mother. Abigail. Her voice was guarded. I wasn't expecting to hear from you again so soon. I just spoke with Brian. Silence. I told him the house belongs to me. I told him you had no right to promise it to him. I was trying to help the family. Karen is pregnant. They need space. You're in Chicago. It makes sense. It doesn't matter what makes sense. It's not your house to give. A long pause. When Camille spoke again, her voice was different. Colder. You've always been this way. Even as a child, you were stubborn and selfish. Your grandmother indulged you. She made you think you were special. Grandma loved me. She saw me. You never did. I saw you perfectly. I saw a daughter who was never satisfied, who always wanted more than she deserved. And now you're letting a perfectly good house sit empty while your cousin's family struggles. This is who you are, Abigail. This is who you've always been. I closed my eyes. My chest ached. For a moment, I was 8 years old again, standing in my mother's immaculate living room, being told that my drawings weren't good enough for the refrigerator. I was 12, being told that my grades weren't high enough. I was 16, being told that my dreams of being a writer were cute but impractical. I was 22, being told that my apartment in Chicago was a phase. I was 30, being asked when I was going to settle down and find a husband. I'm not arguing with you anymore, I said quietly. The house is mine. If you try to give it to anyone else, I will take legal action. Tell Brian and Karen I'm sorry they were caught in the middle of this. But I'm not giving up what Grandma wanted me to have. That house should have been mine. Maybe. But Grandma chose differently. And her wishes matter more than your opinions. I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking. My heart was pounding. I felt like I'd just run a marathon in high heels. But I'd done it. I'd stood my ground. I thought that was the end of it. I thought the worst was over. I was wrong. 2 months later, I flew home for what was supposed to be a quiet family dinner. Drew and Melissa were hosting at their house in Sudbury. The invitation had come with an olive branch attached. Mom wants to talk. She says she's ready to move forward. I was skeptical but hopeful. Maybe she'd finally accepted reality. Maybe we could start rebuilding. The dinner was pleasant enough. Roast chicken, asparagus, a good bottle of wine. Drew's daughters played in the living room while the adults made small talk. My mother was composed, almost warm. She asked about my work. She complimented my dress. It felt surreal, like watching a movie of a family I'd never actually belonged to. Then dessert arrived, and everything changed. Before we have coffee, my mother announced, I have something I'd like to share with everyone. She produced a large manila envelope from beside her chair. She opened it and withdrew a series of photographs. The first was an exterior shot of the Lexington house. The second was the living room. The third was the bedroom with the yellow walls. I've been doing a lot of thinking, Camille said, her voice taking on the measured cadence of someone delivering a prepared speech. About family. About legacy. About what we owe each other. She placed the photograph of the yellow bedroom in the center of the table. Brian and Karen are expecting their first child in December. They've been struggling. The apartment in Waltham is too small. They've been looking for something bigger, but in this market. She shook her head. It's impossible. Mom, I started. Abigail, let me finish. I know the Lexington house belongs to you. I've accepted that. She smiled at me. It was the smile of a predator who'd just spotted prey. But I also know you're a reasonable person. You understand that family comes first. So I've taken the liberty of having some documents drawn up. She pulled a stack of papers from the envelope. Legal forms. Transfer of deed. Quitclaim agreement. My name was already typed in the signature lines. All you need to do is sign, Camille said. And Brian and Karen can move in next month. It's the right thing to do, Abigail. For the baby. For the family. I stared at the documents. I stared at my mother's perfectly composed face. I stared at the photograph of the yellow bedroom, my bedroom, and I understood that this had never been about Brian or Karen or their unborn child. This was about control. This was about winning. This was about proving that I would always, eventually, give in. No, I said. The word hung in the air like a bell struck once. Camille's smile flickered. What? I said no. I'm not signing anything. The house is mine. It stays mine. Abigail, don't be unreasonable. I'm not being unreasonable. I'm setting a boundary. For 34 years, you've treated me like an extension of yourself. Like my life, my choices, my possessions all belong to you. They don't. This house belongs to me. My life belongs to me. And I'm done letting you take things that aren't yours. My mother's face transformed. The composed mask crumbled, and beneath it was something raw and furious. You ungrateful child. Her voice rose. After everything I've done for you. After I raised you, educated you. You didn't raise me. You managed me. There's a difference. How dare you? I know about the power of attorney. Silence. Absolute, terrible silence. I know you tried to forge Grandma's signature. I know you tried to take control of her assets. I know Ellen Cho stopped you. And I know you've been lying about all of it ever since. My mother's face went pale. Drew looked between us, bewildered. Melissa grabbed the children and ushered them out of the room. That's a lie, Camille whispered. Who told you? Ellen Cho, Grandma's lawyer. She told me everything. The forged documents. The investigation. The reason Grandma changed her will in the first place. You have no proof. I have Ellen's testimony. I have the documents she's been keeping for 2 years. I have the forensic report on the signature, the one that showed a 98% probability of forgery. My mother's hands were shaking. For the first time in my life, I saw fear in her eyes. Real fear. What are you going to do? She asked. I stood up. I picked up the photograph of the yellow bedroom, the room my grandmother had painted with me, the room where I dreamed of becoming someone who mattered, and I tucked it into my purse. "I'm not going to do anything," I said. But Ellen already filed a report with the Middlesex County District Attorney's Office. They've been investigating for weeks. "I came here tonight hoping you'd choose honesty. Instead, you chose this." I gestured at the transfer documents still scattered across the table. "You chose to try again. After everything. You tried again. Abigail. Goodbye, Mother." I walked out of my brother's house and into the cool October evening. Behind me, I heard shouting. My mother's voice, high and desperate. Drew's voice, confused and angry. The sound of a family finally shattering under the weight of its own lies. I didn't look back. The investigation took 4 months. In February, the district attorney's office announced that Camille Sterling had accepted a plea agreement. No prison time. She was 72, a first-time offender, and the forgery had been unsuccessful, but she was required to pay restitution for the legal costs incurred by both Ellen Cho and myself, complete 200 hours of community service, and submit to regular financial monitoring for 3 years. She was also banned from contacting me directly. All communication was to go through attorneys. The social consequences were, in some ways, worse. The library board asked her to step down. The Christmas party, that legendary Weston institution, was quietly discontinued. Friends who'd known her for decades suddenly found themselves busy when she called. The community that had once admired Camille Sterling now viewed her with suspicion and discomfort. She'd spent her life building a reputation. She'd destroyed it in a single evening. Brian and Karen found an apartment in Framingham. I didn't hear from them again. My brother Drew called me in March. His voice was heavy. "I didn't know," he said, "about any of it. The forgery, the power of attorney, all of it. I know you didn't. I should have paid more attention. I should have." He trailed off. "I'm sorry, Abby. For everything. For letting her treat you that way. For never standing up for you. Thank you. Is there a way forward? For us?" I thought about it. "I'd like that. But it's going to take time." "I understand." "We talk now. Not often. Not easily. But we talk. Last month, I drove to Lexington. The house was waiting for me exactly as it had always been. The roses were blooming. The kitchen still smelled faintly of lavender. The yellow bedroom was still yellow. I've decided not to rent it out. I've decided not to sell it. I'm going to keep it, not as a museum to my grandmother's memory, but as a place where I can come when I need to remember who I am. The woman she saw. The woman she believed I could become. I stood in the yellow bedroom and touched the wall where my 15-year-old self had carefully painted around the window frame. I thought about my grandmother, about the courage it must have taken her to stand up to her own daughter, to protect what mattered, to refuse to be erased. She taught me something in the end. She taught me that love isn't about giving in. It's about standing firm. It's about protecting what's precious. It's about saying no when saying yes would destroy you. I'm still learning that lesson. I think I'll be learning it for the rest of my life. But I have time. I have the house. I have the memory of a woman who loved me enough to fight for me. And I have the knowledge that I'm not my mother. I never was. I never will be. If you've made it this far, thank you. This story wasn't easy to tell, but I needed to tell it. If it resonated with you, if you've ever had to stand up to someone who was supposed to love you, but tried to control you instead, leave a comment. Share your story. Let's remind each other that we're not alone. And if you want more stories like this, hit subscribe. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Take care of yourselves. Protect your peace. Set your boundaries. I'm Abigail Sterling. Thank you for listening.